Allow yourself to process the stress and tension that accumulates naturally over time through peak exertion. So you're not just allowing it to stagnate in your body, ignoring the warning signs, and then trying to cover it over with the classic dysfunctional coping mechanisms of booze and carbs and smartphones, that you're actually processing it in real time or in an appropriate place. And that's actually how you enter deep renewal states that allow you ultimately to raise the bar of expectation for you and your team. The research on high performers that end up burning out and having poor mental health and ultimately losing their capacity is that it's actually subconscious beliefs that drive an extreme work ethic that leads them to that place. I will prove my worth through work. I can do this on my own. I must endure no matter what. I will not show weakness. So all of us, even though we present as consummate professionals who are at the top of our game, we also come from a legacy of childhood wounding and trauma. We come from often a generation of parents who had the pressure cooker of a nuclear family environment, who, let's be honest, weren't very emotionally attuned. And so all of us have, on some degree, slightly dysregulated nervous systems, and we have compensating strategies. And high performers often have compensating strategies towards being a perfectionist, being achievement orientated, which is a superpower. But until they actually start doing inner work through really good executive coaching or through therapy, they become mastered by that, and it sends them over their red line, over their actual capacity, and that's where you see productivity decline. So it's bad for health and it's bad for business. Well, it's a big one. The first is a very basic question. You have to ask yourself, what is my relationship with rest? And when I ask senior leaders this, when I'm doing my leadership talk shows and my keynotes, it's a tough one for them because, in a way, they often discover that unless they're working, which is their source of agency and validation and where they get the dopamine hit of going through their to-do list, they kind of feel restless. They need to find solace by what I call mowing the lawn, tending to constant to-do lists so it doesn't become a jungle. And there's logic in that. You need to keep on top of things. But ultimately, they need to be able to go into a state of deep renewal and recovery so their nervous system drops and they're actually able to resource their next wave of productivity. And some of the key, I would say, hacks that are coming out in the research, one is having what's called an opposite world. This comes from Nick Petrie, a leading qualitative researcher in Burnout. And it's basically an activity or a craft or something that you do that just you completely lose yourself in and you leave the world of work behind. So for me, I live on the south coast of the UK, it's surfing. When I'm on the waves, even if I'm not catching them, I leave the world behind. For other, 80-hour-a-week hedge fund traders, it could be tango dancing. It doesn't really matter what it is, but you have to regain your opposite world. And then there are hacks like non-sleep deep rest, which CEOs like Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, does multiple times a day. And that's where you deliberately lie down, remove all sensory stimulation, and allow yourself to process the stress and tension that accumulates naturally over time through peak exertion. So you're not just allowing it to stagnate in your body, ignoring the warning signs, and then trying to cover it over with the classic dysfunctional coping mechanisms of booze and carbs and smartphones, that you're actually processing it in real time or in an appropriate place. And that's actually how you enter deep renewal states that allow you ultimately to raise the bar of expectation for you and your team. Well, many of us are tired all the time. We've got bags under our eyes. So that first symptom, classic symptom of burnout, of fatigue, exhaustion, is actually quite hard to distinguish. So really, I would say the big marker is a loss of enthusiasm that slowly turns to cynicism. That's a real marker of burnout. And that's essentially the body's way of saying, no, I'm not happy with the working conditions that I have put myself through or that are put onto me. And the answer is essentially making a mental health check-in part of your one-to-ones with your team. I love this beautiful framework that comes from Ted Egley, who works at Target. And the check-in framework is focus me, free me, know me. First of all, focus me. Help me figure out what's actually priority in the sea of urgent requests that come in. The second is free me. It's actually, let's just take off your plate the things that are burdening you you that aren't actually priority for the business. But crucially, the third one is know me. And what's really interesting, and the research again from Gallup, is that people who have managers who listen are 67% less likely to burn out. They're 57% more likely to be engaged. And so thinking about that one-to-one check-in as a power move, where you're actually coming to know the person, checking the pulse of how they're doing, and also slowly getting to understand them and playing to their strengths, which ultimately liberates their talents. That's how we thread the needle between not just spotting the early signs of burnout, but actually deepening and inspiring people to give their all.